Today I'll be tying a Dolly Llama streamer. This is a really effective fly. I use it for bull trout. You can tie it in a variety of colors. I like the olive and white. This happens to be a variant with a black barring on the rabbit. But the other colors I like are purple and black. But you can use a variety of colors and figure out which one works best for you. To start with, I'll begin with tying the trailer hook. So this is a Daiichi 2557. It's a stinger hook. For the thread, I'm using some Danville 140 denier in olive. I'll start the thread behind the eye of the hook and wrap with touching turns. I'll go all the way to the hook point and come back a couple of wraps. This was the rabbit strip that I'm using. And you'll notice that it's got the leather on the one side and then the rabbit fibers on the other. And you want a long piece so that it will work for you when you tie the rest of the fly. So I have a sponge here that has a little bit of water on it, and I will pull it out and get a little bit of dampness on my fingers, and then that's how you can manage some of your materials. So I'd like to separate everything, all of these the rabbit fur, so I can get a good secure wrap around the leather or the hide of the hook, or the rabbit rather. And just make sure it's on top. I secure it with 5 good wraps. Pull all the fibers back and then come forward to about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. And we'll do this exactly the same way again. So I pull it forward and measure, see where I can open these fibers up. Use a little more water to get the fibers out of the way. And make it sure it's securely tied on top of the hook. We'll pull this out, make a few wraps in front, and whip finish. And that will be the trailer. And I'll attach the fly pattern, a link to the fly pattern sheet below on my RiverKeeper fly website. People have asked me whether you can tie this in on the other side, because if you look at the fly, the hook is on the bottom, and some people want that to ride up, perhaps. But if you do that, then this tail is going to be impacted by the hook, so I don't see that works. The next thing I will do, I just have a section of 30-pound fly backing line, and I will put it through using a flosser that you just use for your teeth, but this works pretty well for me. So I'll put one section through, pull it up, and I've wrapped it around, and then I'll put it through from the top, and I'll put the other section through. And I'll line these butt ends here. And there we go. So just make sure it's long enough that you can complete the next step. So the next step, I have a Mustad 34007 hook. I think this is a 1/0. It doesn't matter really what hook you use because we're going to cut this point off when we're finished with it. One important thing is, though, when I attach the cone, this is a Spirit River 9.6 millimeter or a 3/8 inch cone. And I really advise crimping the barb so you can get this around the hook bend. So let me put some thread on. I'm using the same thread. And I just like to create a coating here, a base of thread. I'll go back to about the barb and then come forward a couple of wraps. I'll pull the trailer out, and I want to make sure that these are straight. So I'll go ahead and make a couple of loose wraps, and now I can adjust it for length. So I like to have about 1 inch or so, but when you pull this forward, you'll see how the overall length of the fly is. So if you want it longer, you can certainly make it clear out to here. It depends on how long your rabbit is for you to complete the next steps. But most of the time I like it right about 1 inch. So we'll set that and now make a few thread wraps as we're going forward. So I'm not pressing or creating tension as I go across, because that will put these fibers or the fly line backing, it will push it over to the other side. And I want these to be directly on top, so I take kind of a soft wrap and then pull down. And you notice that those aren't moving at all. So I want to bind them down tightly. And I'll go all the way to the cone. Speed up here a little bit. When I first started tying these, I would loop these through the eye of the hook and then bring them back and through the cone. And that was really difficult to do. And I haven't done that in a long time. So I've used this technique, and I have not had any problems with the trailer hook pulling out. So this seems to be secure for me. And I'll catch, I've had bull trout that are probably 28 to 30 inches. I don't know how heavy they are. I've never been a good estimator of weight in fish. So you notice I stopped before I came back to where I tied that on initially, and then I'll trim those at a little bit of an angle, and that will create a taper. I just like tapers. And I'll go back a little bit here. And we'll keep that secure. The other thing I found helpful was to put a rubber band around the trailer hook and attach it to my vise somewhere. And that will help with my next step. It also keeps this out of the way so you don't impale yourself. These hooks are very, very sharp. And on more than one occasion, I've got a little blood. So you notice that it will pull up, and when I tie this down, I don't want the fly line backing to be loose like that. I want it to be taut, but so I've got to manage that somehow. I'm using some more water again, just to try to get these fibers out of the way. And I'll use my bodkin. So I just have it placed on top, and I'll use my bodkin and see where my thread is. And then just open up a space for me to tie that in. Make sure again that it's taut but not too tight. And I'll make some wraps here. Make sure it's on top of the hook. And the hide goes around and doesn't buckle. So it's going to go around the hook. And there's 5 good solid wraps with this 140 denier thread. Be very careful when you pull this back because you will hook yourself. I'll move the thread forward to just behind the cone, and I'm going to start wrapping this around like this with touching turns. And before I do that though, I'll be using some Zap-A-Gap. And this will add some security for the fly line backing as well as holding that hide down. This will be a really durable fly. Now on the first wrap, I'll just make sure I don't put too much tension on it and pull this around. So on the second, you notice I'm going just directly in front and making a really tight wrap. I don't want to get any of these fibers bunched up, so I'm wrapping it with touching turns. And I'll continue wrapping that forward. And just wiggle it back and forth, and it will start to go into the head of the cone. If you choose to have a heavier fly, you can certainly add some weight and stick it in the cone, but I found that I just use a weighted line, a weighted head. And I will tie this off now. I want to make sure I don't bind some of those fibers down, so I'll use my bodkin to get the rabbit fur up. And then just use my thread to go through those. Now if I cut this off, you'll notice there's a little bit of gap here. I could have made another turn, and I'm going to do that in a minute. But if you cut this off, what it will look like is this. So you'll see that there's a little bit of thread showing, and honestly I don't think that makes any difference in the fishability of this fly. It might look that it isn't finished yet, but I'll show you how I finished the fly with just this, the rabbit, but I'm leaving this tied off. I tie it off on top because I'll make one more wrap. The other thing you can do to finish the fly is put a little dubbing on it. I'll use a dubbing loop for that. Again, I don't know if that's critical or not, but that's what I've done. For the bottom of the fly, I'll be using some white rabbit. I just have a strip, and I will get some of these fibers, and I'm going to remove them. Just pull them off. And then I'll turn the fly upside down and use my scissor point and place that in the cone. So I'll make a tight wrap, making sure that I don't bind the other rabbit fur down. and that will be the rest of the fly. The next piece will be some lateral scale, and this is just some flash. So I'll take 2 pieces. You can tell I've used most of this up. Take 1 piece and wrap it around the thread and even the ends somewhat. I'll turn the fly sideways so you can see that this just puts it exactly where I want it. So I'll make a couple of wraps, perhaps 3 here, trying not to bind down that rabbit. And then I'll do exactly the same thing on the other side. I'll even the ends. Try to even the ends. And just place it right along the side. As with the other side, I will make some securing wraps and then fold all of those backwards, trying to keep the rabbit fur out of the way, and then I will make some secure wraps. I found this at times these might pull out if you hook a couple of fish, so I like to just put a dab of super glue right along the edges. Be careful, that's why I like this brushable, so that you don't bind down a lot of the rabbit. And we'll see if we can make one more wrap then, and that will finish off the head of the fly. And you'll see it'll cover up all those thread wraps. And I'll tuck that in. And bind it down with thread. Be careful, don't hit that hook point. I'll take my Zappa Gap and put a little bit on the thread. And use a whip finish. I'll trim my thread, and while we trim everything else here, I will take the lateral and grab them all together. And I want them just a little bit shorter than the overall length of the fly. So I'll just trim it at an angle. And while I'm trimming, I'll also trim the white rabbit. And I want to trim it on the hide, where the hide and the point of the hook are. So I don't want to trim it like this. I want the remaining rabbit fur to cover the hook point. So I'll just put my scissors through there, trim it, and you'll notice that it's right at the hook point. And the reason that you do that is that you don't want this to hang up, and if you leave the hide in, it has a tendency to do that. So the only thing remaining to do, let me just, I've got a little brush here, finger brush. Make sure all those are out. I'll take the hook out of the vise, take my rubber band off. The last step is to If you like to keep this in, this hook point in, you certainly may, but I like to take it off. So I'll use a pair of cutters here and just come up and make it just around the bend of the hook. And don't press this now. Put your hand around it, and you will always catch the hook point so it doesn't go flying into your eye or somewhere else. So this is the completed Dolly Llama. And I think if you tie some of those up, you'll catch some fish with it. So again, the fly pattern sheet will be in the description below, and I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe to my RiverKeeper Fly YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the near future.